Forward. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 11th annual Creative Conference with the Atlanta Film Festival. We're very excited to present this conversation that I've been looking forward to for quite some time. My name is Raymond Carr. I'm a filmmaker and creature effects puppeteer, and that has a film actually in the Atlanta Film Festival this year. And I am very excited. I got the chance, Linda Burns asked me who I wanted to interview, and this man was at the top of my list, and we're so grateful for us to have him, partially because I've been a fan of his for the better part of a decade, and I'm also a huge fan of his show, Flight Attendant. So the great Steve Yockey. Hello.
Hello.
Fabulous. So I'm just going to jump right into
just real quick. I think it's the 45th annual Atlanta Film Festival, but I'm 44, so I'm not counting the first year. I wanted to say the first year was like a gimme, and then it started in earnest.
Yes, of course. I mean, okay. It was like they had the Lion King moment where they brought you as a baby into the Atlanta Film Festival. It's like, now we may begin.
Yeah. That explains a lot, actually, about the trajectory of my life. So yes, thank you very much. Just as long as we've got some ground rules set, it's that the first year didn't count. There we go.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fair. That's completely reasonable and makes perfect sense. So as I said, I've been a fan of yours for many years. I think I've seen most, if not all, of the mainstream, the bigger plays that you've done in Atlanta. Even though a lot of them, my fondest memories of the original Dad's Garage space in Inman Park, in the backspace, which seated about 60 people, was seeing your weird, surrealist, hilarious, gut-wrenching plays and seeing them multiple times at time. And honestly, that was part of the reason why I started to do film, was because I loved your plays and I wanted other people to see them. But so few people saw them, I felt like. And I was like, if this is so good, if I'm going to try and make something, I want it to last and more people to see it. So
that means so much to me, man. It really does. Those productions at the Dad's Garage backspace. I mean, the artists working at Dad's Garage, this is still true, but like the artists working in that old space at that time, it was like everyone gave 200% of their creative selves, and in a lot of cases their personal selves, to whatever the project was back there. If it was puppet slams, if it was stuff on the main stage, it was those backspace plays. And I just think there was just some crazy art going through there. So I was thrilled to be a part of it. I owe all of that to Sean Daniels for putting my plays in 8.5 by 11, the short play festival, and then Kate Warner going, maybe you could write a longer one of these. And I was like, maybe. And she's like, great, we're going to put it up in September, so get to work. And I was like, oh God, I have to write.
Really? Was that your first like play? Was that Dad's doing that?
My first produced plays were those 10-minute plays. And I did 8.5 by 11 for a couple of years. It was always like, funny play, funny play, funny play, funny play, funny play. And I was like the one, like with people screaming at the audience and choking themselves and dying. And, and I just, Kate Warner saw something in that, and she's like, if we were going to let you do a full-length play, what would it be? And I think I handed her like a piece of paper that had like 6 pictures that I had pulled from different anime cartoons and a soundtrack of like Bjork songs and weird shit. And I was like, it would be something like this and kind of dreamy. And she was like, great, it's on the season. And I was like, what are you talking about, Kate Warner? So that's how I wrote Sleepy. And actually, because I was so nervous to write a full-length play, it was 80 minutes, but sure. I basically just, and I was used to writing for 8.5 by 11 at that point. I wrote a play that basically consisted of 7 10-minute stories.
Yeah. That description that you described, the pitch that you gave it felt accurate. Based on, that was, I mean, when was that? My memory, nothing.
Sleepy was in 2005, so like 15 years ago.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That's when we started going in earnest. So I guess this is part of my first question, was to kind of track your story, because after that you kind of went in earnest. Did you go study playwriting in college, or?
Yeah, so Lauren Gunderson, who's also a very well-known playwright from Atlanta, the most produced playwright in the country, we both lived in that small Carpenters at Large building, like right next to Dad's garage. We were in the same apartment as roommates, and we were like, how do you get out of Atlanta? Like, not that Atlanta's bad, but like as an artist, you're like, how do you get your plays out to meet other people? And Alice Twan was in an 8.5 by 11 festival, and she went to get coffee with us, and she's like, you've got to just say, we're not supposed to swear a lot, but she's like, you've got to just say fuck it, right? And then like, and write the craziest stuff you want to write, and then also apply to schools, apply to fellowships, apply to programs. So I took her at her word, and so did Lauren. And that year I got into the MFA program at NYU. And then the next year, Lauren got in and came to New York also.
But then you came back to Atlanta after that, right? Or did you, or because you had plays produced in Atlanta?
Oh yeah, I continued when I was in grad school having plays produced. Well, I had a Skin was at Dad's Garage in 2006, and Cartoon was with Out of Hand at 2006, which is a play that I'm incredibly proud of, and that Out of Hand co-created with me and really taught me how to do generative work, like to work with artists to create a piece. And they blew the doors out in that production, which got panned by the AJC. So I was like, oh no, my career's done before it even begins. Because I thought the AJC at that point was like the arbiter of all things in my life. And then you kind of like realize life is more than reviews. But yeah, and then when I was in grad school is when I developed my real relationship with Actors Express, playwright producing relationship, and so that they produced then my next 5 or 6 plays.
And you were living in New York that whole time?
I was living in New York for the 2 years I was in grad school, but I got to tell you, I don't do New York very well. It's like the pace of it. Having grown up in Atlanta myself, that it's very it's frenetic in a way that I can't process. So when I got out, I came back to Atlanta to do a 1 semester teaching fellowship at Emory about work of dramatic structure. And then I did a year-long residency at Marin Theater Company in San Francisco for playwriting. And then I moved to LA.
Those 3 plays, Skin, Sleepy, and Cartoon, those were the ones that like really shook me in that time. And part of that is just like where I was, and like it was new, everything was new for me, and I was working with Push Push Theater and all those cats and dailies, and
Push Push was the theater that was doing the weird stuff, man. Like they were like Dad's Garage was doing fun, dark, but still come have a beer and kind of enjoy in a way. And Push Push was doing the like, you come and watch this and you think about the world. It's like you come and watch this and think about how we need to change things, or things could be fundamentally, or how things are fundamentally broken. And so that Push Push was doing some great work, man.
I know it sounds like we're just having a private conversation right now, but it's mostly just to tout the amazing art that has come out of Atlanta over the years. And that's kind of why I wanted to touch on that before we kind of dove much further. And obviously, I didn't realize, I mean, I know that Lauren is prolific, but I didn't realize she's the most produced playwright.
She's the most produced living playwright in the American theater. There are people who are more produced, but they are no longer alive.
Sure, yeah, no, but, and she's also a very young woman, so she got a lot more living and a lot more play to do.
She's got time.
Yeah, that's fabulous. So obviously we talked a little bit about New York and how that wasn't your vibe. Going to LA, was the TV market something that you always had your eyes on, or did you think you were just going to stick in the theater world?
I didn't think I was going to stick to theater. I'll tell you what, I had this amazing residency through the National New Play Network that paid for basically my living expenses in San Francisco for a year. And I fell in love with the West Coast. Like I fell in love, specifically the San Francisco West Coast. And at the end of that year, I could not afford to live in San Francisco without the help of that residency. And because I was a playwright, which means I had very little money. And And you just know that going in, you know, when you decide to be a playwright, you don't decide to be Tony Kushner. You know what I mean?
Right.
When you decide to be a working playwright, you're signing up to scrape.
Yeah.
And you're doing it because you love it. But I will say that my agents at the time called me and they were like, hey, since you're already in San Francisco, it's like 5 hours down to Los Angeles. If you've got to move somewhere, why don't you try television? You've always talked about it. But for me, television always felt like something that other people got to do. Like it felt like very far away. And I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. So I went down and I moved into like a studio apartment in downtown Los Angeles, which at the time was not where you wanted to be. and although, you know, it's very nice, it's just not where anyone is. So I was sort of cut off from everybody because Los Angeles is so sprawling. And I spent a lot of time by myself. So I did writing and I got very, very lucky. And about 6 months after moving to Los Angeles, I had this half-hour dark comedy set in Inman Park in Atlanta about a dental practice that these two brothers operated. And it was a comedy, but one of the brothers commits suicide on like the 5th page. And so people were like,
classic Yockey.
Well, people were listening to the pitch. I was like pitching it to them and they were like, this is not a comedy. And I was like, no, but it is. And they were like, it's not a comedy. And so I decided I would just write it. And then I got very lucky because Sony got to read a copy of it thanks to a producer, an intermediary producer. And they bought it outright, it wasn't like, if we sell this, we'll give you some money. It's like They just bought it, which was more money than I had ever seen as a playwright in my entire life, but also sort of, it kept me from feeling like I had my face pressed up against the glass in Los Angeles and I was like tapping at the window. I was like, oh, if I sold this, I'm not totally bad at this. And so maybe I could do this. And that's what allowed me to kind of stay in LA.
That's a good point. I think a lot of people, especially in Atlanta and myself included, have this mindset of like, I'm going to write this thing so I can make it, or I'm going to write this thing so it can, and then I'm going to pitch it everywhere. Or I'm just going to have this idea that I'm going to keep around in my briefcase. But it's great that you were able to actually write it and then try and get it sold. And did it get produced? I assume it hasn't been produced.
It did not. But that's like the thing you learn is that like it's much easier. Look, it's really hard to sell something, but it's like 20 times harder after you sell it to actually get it made. Lots and lots of people can say yes, lots and lots of money can be spent, and then one person says no and it all vanishes. And that's just kind of the reality of television that you get used to. But I will say that like the money doesn't hurt. Like, you know, it is really a shift in perspective, because if you're coming from, I would say, like an indie film environment, or if you're coming from playwriting, like in not-for-profit theaters, you're used to like, here's $500, create a full-length play for a 3-week run, right? And this is the total amount of money that you have.
Yeah.
And so in television, all of a sudden you're looking at these stratospheric amounts, and your background in kind of having to make tough choices about money really comes in handy, because all of a sudden you can make that stuff last. Like you can make that stuff really work for you, the resources that are available in television. So I think that I think I got lucky that I sold something very quickly. And then it was just about kind of trying to make it a career.
Right. So taking a step back, you mentioned that you did have reps at that point. Did you have a spec prior that got you the reps, or was it your plays?
No, I wrote a play my first year in grad school. We had this amazing teacher Liz Diggs, who like came in. It's like an older woman with like a gray, short, kind of cropped haircut that like always wore tracksuits and was like, put the drama on the stage, or like whatever. But she was like, really write whatever you're like passionate about. Don't worry about whether it's going to get produced, which is a very easy thing to say. But like, if you're like me and you've spent a couple years writing things specifically for the backspace at 7 Stages or the backspace at Dad's Garage and worrying about production, like, I don't want to ask for too much. You kind of have to change the way you think. But I wrote a play in her class called Octopus that got produced actually at Actors Express, did the world premiere. Then the Magic Theater did it out in San Francisco, and that production that Kate Warner from Atlanta directed got a lot of national attention, and really kicked off my sort of larger or outside of Atlanta playwriting career, not larger, and that was what got the attention of these agents. So I was in my first semester of grad school, and then they contacted me and said, we'd love to talk to you. And so I went in and was like, I think you should represent me because I'm going to be like a good playwright, and I promise I'll write a lot of plays, and I'm prolific. And then they were like, you need to calm down. We're here to convince you to sign with us. And I was like, oh. And then I was just like, I didn't know that's how this worked. And so, yes, the answer was yes.
That's fabulous. And these were reps that were specifically for theater reps. Okay. That's really interesting. So just jumping ahead, it seems like was your first writer's room Supernatural? Am I right about that?
No, my first writer's room was a little show. It wasn't little, it was their biggest hit, but a show on MTV called Awkward. Yes. And then I spent some time on HBO's The Brink, and then I went back to MTV for Scream. And that was a whole lot of fun. And then I went on to Supernatural, and I stayed there for 5 years.
Right. Okay. Talk a little about your writer's room experience, especially coming from a playwright background. You know, those first days of just walking into this room with people who are LA writers, quote unquote. Your experience, the good, the bad, maybe the do's and don'ts, like some of the things that you have learned from baby writer Steve Yockey to coming into the writer's room for the first time.
I don't know. I guess you're always going to be nervous because every writer's room is different, but there are some givens. There's always a bit of a hierarchy in the room. You know, if you're coming in as a staff writer, it goes staff writer, story editor, executive story editor, co-producer, producer, supervising producer, co-executive producer, executive producer. So, and then showrunner. And so, like all of those, so basically all the people that you see in the opening credits of a television show are writers. And you kind of sit and you kind of learn, it really is like a craftsman trade in a way. The other writers help you learn how to be in a room. So as long as you kind of go in with your ears open and in a thoughtful way, it's very easy to figure out what kind of a room it is. Is it a room where everybody gets to talk? Is it a room where mostly the upper level writers talk and the staff writers can kind of pitch an idea every once in a while? Everybody has different vibes. So you just kind of feel it out, but there's always people in the upper levels that are willing to kind of help the next crew figure out what's going on. So it's great in that respect. And I don't know, it was, I think if I had been a filmmaker, it may have been trickier, but because I was coming from theater, which is ultra collaborative, I feel like filmmakers come from that position of like, this is my vision, right? And playwrights come from like, here, I wrote this blueprint, please build my house. So like, you get used to the collaborative model. And so when you go into a writer's room, you're used to people throwing ideas around. And if it's a good room, it's usually best idea wins, which creates a good show.
So I want to get to kind of the genesis of Flight Attendant, but since we're talking about writer's room, did you have that mentality of like, okay, this is what I want my writer's room to be? Like, did you have a perspective of or maybe even an agenda of like what your writer's room might be when you coming into it?
I think because of the material, I had already written the first 2 episodes. And so we were going to be breaking and writing the next 6 episodes together. I think I wanted, because the show is the Flight Attendant, and I had designed a show where all of the lead characters are female. All the characters that are driving the action are women. Right. And so I wanted a female-heavy writer's room. And we have a diverse cast, so I wanted diversity in the writer's room. It was actually shockingly easy to get both of those things. You know, you hear people talk about how it's really tricky, but I also, just for the record, had incredible producers working on the show from Yes Norman Productions and from Berlanti that like vetted a ton of writers. So both in season 1 and season 2, we were able to kind of put together really fantastic rooms. So my kind of core thing was I wanted a bunch of different kind of writers. Like I wanted some people that had procedural experience, some people that had mystery experience, some people that had like just wrote like crazy fantasy plays, like whatever that was. And then you just kind of figure out what the best mix will be. It's a lot like season planning in theater. You kind of get a good mix of things that work together.
Right, right. So going back to how this started, it's based on a book.
Yes.
What's great is that I was able to interview Ty Frank, who is part of James S.S. Corey, who is the creator of The Expanse. And so he's a writer who wrote a book and then ended up in a writer's room. And you're a writer who got a book and turned it into a TV show. So I'm interested in seeing the other side of it. How did you discover the material, and what was it about the material that kind of spoke to you? Because at a certain point, you kind of have a wide open thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was in a very good position because I had a job on Supernatural, which at the time was like the show that would never not be on television. And it's finished, but like there was no way that show was going anywhere, at least in the immediate future. So so I heard about the open writing assignment at Warner Bros. Open writing assignment. They had already the book. Kaylee found the book. Like our lead actress, Kaylee Cuoco, found the book. So she's the lead EP. She basically was like, this is what I want to do after the Big Bang Theory. Warner Brothers was like, we love it. And they said yes. And then Kaylee, she did the hard work. Then she went to the network and she was like, I want to be in this and produce it. And they were like, if you're going to be in it, yes. And so then that hard job was done. And so it was basically already set up and they just needed a take on the material. So they sent out the book, which is a very straightforward thriller. It doesn't have any of the weird stuff going on in her head. It doesn't have any of the flashback story, none of that. And so it just looks sort of like a dark, traditional thriller when you read the book. I read it, and then their little letter, they said, we want to inject it with some humor and some oddity, and we want Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment meets Fleabag. And I was like, that's an amazing letter. That's a ballsy letter to write, you know? And then you read it as a writer, you're like, what am I doing? So I just had this crazy pitch that felt right to me. And I thought, oh, I'm going to get knocked out of this real quick. And then up the ladder, people just kept saying yes to it. And Kaylee was the last person that I met with. And she's very decisive. She's been in television. I mean, she's, I think, 35 years old, and she's been in television for like 30 years. So it's like she's very decisive. She's very grounded and down to earth, but she's very decisive. And like 2 minutes into my pitch, she just looked over at her executive Suzanne and was like, "Can we just hire him?" And Suzanne's like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Okay, great, keep going. You're hired." And it was like, it was the coolest thing because it totally, then you can like, all the anxiety goes away because you're like, sure. Oh, this is someone who gets what we're doing. And so that's how it came together. Being able to take a story from a book and turn it into something you can watch on TV and something that I could bring my particular brand of theatricality to, is really what attracted me to the project. And I was very lucky that the studio and the network kind of really, for the most part, supported my vision for the show.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has your fingerprints all over it. And it's even more informative to know that like the book didn't have all that surrealist elements to it, because it gets pretty trippy. The show, it's great. And it starts off crazy with a dead body in a bed, and it gets crazier from there.
Listen, I've got to do what's right for me.
Of course. No, I mean, but that's a testament to like, don't try and recreate somebody else's or what you think they might want. You know, I'm sure there are plenty of.
And I think that you also have to, and this is true for anybody, like playwrights that are watching this, TV writers, aspiring TV writers, aspiring filmmakers, whoever's watching this, like two things. One, the thing that people want to buy and put on TV or on the screen or the stage is specifically your vision. Like, how do you see the world? What is your lens? That's what people want. So be as you as humanly possible. And then like, don't be afraid to like, just go a little nuts, because doing something is one thing, but when you do it confidently, I mean, I think the thing that when people say that they respond to the voice of the flight attendant, what they're really saying is they respond to the confidence with which everyone executed the script. And it's because everybody was like, this will work. And so if it had been like a giant train wreck, which maybe some people think it was, if it had been a giant train wreck, then I think that then people would be having a much different conversation. But I think if you believe in what you're doing and you do it confidently, don't apologize for your art while you're making it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. Can you give us like a little bit of taste of what that initial pitch was like, or your take, or if it did feel just like the show that ended up being, or did the initial pitch feel very different from what the show ended up
when you're gonna pitch something like that, you like sort of pitch the teaser, like everything that happens before the opening credits, and then you kind of get into more general terms, and then you talk about the season, right? So I pitched the teaser with Cassie like partying all over the world, and showed her as a flight attendant versus her hard partying lifestyle, waking up waking up on the subway and getting back to her house only to find a naked guy there that she forgot she was supposed to meet the night before. All of that stuff going down, and then into her flight attendant mode all the way through the reveal of Alex's dead body. And then I talked about the Mind Palace, which is what we call everything that happened in her head.
Nerd.
Yeah. And so, but this nerd has now like executives at Warner Brothers and HBO MAX also referring to it as a Mind Palace. So
that's a way to incept that. Great.
I think that that it was just, it was really, you just go deep on the characters. I think the characters I hit the hardest were Cassie, Annie, Megan, because that to me is the heart of the show. And then a lot of time on Alex, because what is that? If he dies in the first episode, who is that for the rest of the episodes? And then I just talked about kind of where I saw the mystery going, and a little bit about the family story that would run underneath it. But, ultimately season 1 was about personal fidelity, like what happens when you're lying to yourself and you're forced to face the truth. And so if you have like kind of an overriding theme like that, then it becomes really easy to build a pitch around it. And you don't ever in the pitch, by the way, you don't ever in the pitch have to say, this is a show about personal fidelity, because people don't care. It's not...
No, that's really interesting, because as much of the weird shit that is in the show, it is very much about her and these characters and their relationships, which I oftentimes, the shows that I love, like this and The Expanse and all other shows, I talk about the crazy stuff that's happening and like the cool effects and all that kind of stuff. But if you were to ask me, what really draws me in are the characters, like everybody else. So it's important not to get bogged down by the flashiness of the show.
Yeah, really the characters and the emotion have to support the flash. It can't be the other way around, or else I'm not going to give specific examples, or else it can
go. So talking a little bit more about your transition into this show, did you take showrunner workshops? Because I know that the WGA, I believe, has one.
I applied. There are these very specific kind of requirements that you have to hit to participate in those types of training programs. The WGA, our union, the Writers Guild of America West, has this really amazing showrunner training program. It's fantastic that it exists. It's fantastic. It's a fantastic resource, but you have to be like, it's only once a year that they offer it. And so it has to time out right, that it sort of lines up with network pilot season. So you have to have a project that's already been greenlit in some way, shape, or form to participate in it. And it doesn't work that way with streaming. You kind of they can say yes to you at any moment. So I couldn't get into the training program, and I just, but the network provided me with a pair of EPs, Meredith Lavender and Marcy Yulin in season 1, who are very experienced, who came aboard to kind of help me not blow up the planet.
Well, that's really interesting because a lot of people don't realize that, making that transition from being a writer to a showrunner, you're in charge of a multi-million-dollar company at that point. You're dealing with budgets.
It happens pretty quickly, and I think it happens like one step at a time. Like they don't just like throw you in and be like, "Here's the budget, good luck." There's a line producer, there's a UPM, there are studio production executives. Like they're massive. What you really have to do is meet everyone and figure out what everybody's job is, and then if you figure out what everybody's job is and you trust them to do their job, then you're going to be in good stead.
Yeah, but especially like a show like this, it's pretty straightforward, but there's a lot of visual effects that people might not even notice, especially like in the Mind Palace and all that kind of stuff, and the flashbacks and all that.
The giant rabbit.
Was that? I mean, I guess Supernatural has a hell of a lot of visual effects as well, but did you feel comfortable coming into this space because of your experience on that show, or
I guess I did, because I don't actually think, coming off of Supernatural, I don't think that the Flight Attendant actually has that many visual effects. Actually, like the biggest visual effect in the entire show doesn't even look like a visual effect. We had to paint out an entire background and replace it with something else because of the time of year. So for my money, they did a beautiful job because no one can tell that in looking at the scene. But yeah, no, I wasn't intimidated by that. And also they gave us a healthy budget. I mean, working with Berlanti Productions, they do all of the DC shows on the CW. And so they're very accustomed to working with VFX. So we got a couple bids from a couple different houses. We looked at their work, and then we decided to go with one particular house, and they did a fantastic job for us.
Yeah, I think that what's interesting, I'd imagine that there's a lot of little visual effects that are happening throughout every episode that the common viewer doesn't notice, just because that's kind of the point. And I'm always fascinated by that process. And it is, like I said, it's different from coming from a playwright point of view, that you don't necessarily have to deal with these just different elements. And obviously you have a director and you have other VFX supervisors dealing with it, but you still have to think about stuff like that in the writer's room.
Yeah, but I think you're thinking about it at a even if it's a small thing, you're thinking about it at a pretty macro level. I mean, you're put in the position of walking into a room with your post supervisor and your editor and your VFX person if they're there, but that they usually aren't there in the room, and saying like, I really want to make this adjustment. Let's figure out how to do that. And then they'll be like, okay, we're going to see if we can do that. And then they come back to you and they're like, we can do that. So, I mean, I think it's like the thing where when you're a playwright and you're like, I think the lights are supposed to be a little different. I don't know what the lighting designer then does to change those. I just kind of assess the finished product. And I think that's true. I mean, of showrunning, there are people who come up through production who know every little detail. I do not know that. I depended on other producers and an incredible post-production supervisor.
So talking about the directors on the show, you talked about what you wanted to have in your writer's room, the different types of people and all that kind of stuff. What were you looking for in a director for this kind of show? And what really drew you to the people that you brought in for this to direct, to make this come to life?
So I think we were lucky because a lot of people really responded to the material. Like they were excited that it was something a little bit different or just something that felt off the beaten path a bit. And so that was cool to have multiple options. I think, look, we were looking for the same thing in terms of you want representation behind the camera and in front of the camera. So just like with the writer's room, I felt like it was important to have female directors. I felt like it was important to have directors of color. We had both. And just to have a variety of viewpoints, because Susanna Fogel, who directed the first 2 episodes, came in, set really a strong visual tone. So we weren't worried that the people that came behind her, who are all extremely skilled directors, wouldn't be able to match that. So they were able. She left a very a very clear blueprint of what the show looks like. And so then each of these directors that came in after her got to add their own little bells and whistles. But what we looked for in the interviews was people who look, there's like if a director came in talking about Cassie and her journey through that particular episode they were looking at, or through the pilot that they read or whatever, that was usually a good sign that we were onto the right thing. If somebody came on and said, you know, I can really do a great thing with these 2 FBI agents, then that probably wasn't the right person to direct for us, you know? And also in some of them, we knew episode 6 was going to be crazy, like visually crazy, which when Cassie goes on a bender. And so, like, we were looking for someone like Baton Silva, who is a Mexican director who has just a really amazing visual style. So it's like, if you kind of find people and kind of try and fit them to the episodes where they're going to be able to shine.
That's really interesting. For you, did you feel like, obviously these are massively professional and experienced directors, but on the day when you were in production, what was your favorite place to be? I mean, obviously you were being pulled in a dozen different directions, but first, did you have all the scripts prepared when you went into production? Or were you still writing?
We will for season 2, because that was crazy. Like, like that was insane. So for season 2, everyone has agreed all 8 scripts will be written before production starts, and thank goodness. For season 1, they were almost done. I had to write out of order because we had to film because we go to Rome in episode 3 of season 1, but we're also in Rome for the finale. So we had to write the finale out of order so that when we went to Rome in January, we could pick up all the footage that we were going to need, because you can't just, I mean, we had a nice budget, but not the kind where you can just fly back and forth to Rome whenever you feel like it. So, so there were some tricks to season 1 in terms of the scripts, but I always feel really comfortable on set because I sort of recognize that the crew is kind of the lifeblood of your production. I mean, the people that are there working their asses off are the reason that you get to put your show on television. So certainly pre-COVID, but definitely when we went back post-COVID, like we were one of the first shows to go back after the production hiatus. And we went back in August of last year and filmed in New York and finished our last 3 episodes, but it was intense. And watching those guys come in every day and kind of in these insane like safety protocol conditions that everybody's used to now, but were brand new to us, and getting tested three or 4 times a week and all of that, it was just really heartening to be like, oh, right, like it's you know, it's a fucking family. So you can be comfortable on set. I'm really comfortable on set. I don't have a problem talking to directors because I've hired people that I believe in. And I've hired people who I hope are willing to have conversations about certain things if it's not looking the way that we need it to. But we had really super collaborative experience on the show. So I can't say enough good things about the people we worked with.
And so you mentioned the COVID break. Talk to me about what that was like. What happened, and when did you guys get shut down? Where were you in production during the shutdown?
I think it was the Thursday. It was the Wednesday before the Monday when everything in the country shut down. So it was that Wednesday. I came back from filming. We had a call that was like, oh, we're supposed to go out of the city and film in Westchester tomorrow, which was a hot zone at that time. It was one of the first kind of big hot zones. And so we were like, we're not going to do that. I think we're just going to take that day off. The studio had suggested that. We were like, yes, the producers were all in favor of it. And then the next day they were like, okay, we're going to take 2 weeks. We're going to take 2 weeks off. And we were 1 day into shooting episode 6. So they were like, we're going to shut down for 2 weeks until we kind of feel this out, right? We're going to take a pause, a production pause. And then the next day they were like, hey, get on a plane, fly back to LA. So I did. And then 2 weeks turned into 6 months. You know, there wasn't a world where even I'm not saying anyone said this because the network and the studio were both extremely conscious of this, but even if they had been like, go ahead and go back. Like if there wasn't a way to keep the crew safe, we were not interested in coming back up.
Yeah.
So when we did finally come back up, we had 2 weeks of quarantine because we flew into New York and had to quarantine because we were coming from California. And then we had 4 weeks of prep, and then we picked up with the second day of episode 6 and went straight through to the end.
And did anything change during those the shutdown elements?
Yeah, I mean, while we were shut down, we were continually, because we were in post on 1 through 5, so it was kind of neat to be able to see what adjustments we needed to make or if there were any like pickups to do. But also because our editors were like working from home, which God love them, because that I can't imagine editing from home. Yeah, it was. We had to adjust one stunt and we had to adjust a couple crowd scenes, but for the most part, we got to keep everything that we wanted intact, which was good. We did have 2 actors of a certain age who didn't feel comfortable being on set because of the risk at over a certain age. And so we did have to kind of rework sort of something in the finale and a little bit of episode 6, but we were able to do it in a way that still felt satisfying.
Talk a little bit about your relationship with your star and executive producer. How does that dynamic work, knowing that you have a voice that you are writing for, that these words are going to come out of her mouth, that she's going to have her own input? What is your relationship like with her in pre-pro and on set?
I mean, it's not like a vanity producer title. Like Kaylee's very involved in the production of the show. She's an incredible number one to have on set because you set the tone from the top down. She never has a bad day. Like it's always positive. It's always upbeat. She keeps the crew's energy up. So I think between the two of us, it's a largely happy set. It's a TV set, so people are going to get agitated at times, but
yeah.
She's terrific to work with. And I always just remember, like, I created the character specifically for her because I was like, oh, wow, after you meet her, she's a TV star for a reason. She has a charisma that really draws you in. And so I'm like, oh, wow, I can write the darkest, most fucked up character in the world, have her play it. And the friction that it creates by her bringing her skill set to this character is going to be like the pop and fizz of the show and really help create this weird tone that we want to do, which is like, if you dropped Kaylee Cuoco into a Jimmy Stewart role in an Alfred Hitchcock film, you would have the flight attendant. So set in the 60s. The 60s aesthetic. So I think that it's a really good relationship. She trusts me not to ask her to do anything that's going to make her look silly, and I trust her gut because she makes makes very sort of like when she hired me and like after 2 minutes, she makes these decisive choices that on the whole turn out to be the right direction. And so, I think it's a really healthy relationship.
That's amazing. And especially you got to have that when you're going to be, married at the hip with these people creatively and financially and all these different dynamics. You can't hate the person that you're going to be living with for the next X amount of years that this is open.
No, but I know that there are shows where even that's a known given. Do you know what I mean? That like the people don't get along. I can't imagine existing in that environment for very long. I certainly wouldn't be coming back to do it again. But I think that, in a lot of ways, Kaylee's not just an executive producer, the number one on the call sheet. She's like the lead producer because this is really, she listened to the crazy shit that I pitched and was like, yes, I'll take a chance on that. And so like, I will always be the person that's there to try and deliver material that she can make shine. And so I think that's a healthy relationship to have.
Absolutely. And I mean, and everybody, critics and audiences have agreed. And the fact that like HBO Max is still pushing the hell out of it, which is spectacular. Like it's up on my homepage all the time.
I can't tell because I like, obviously we're in the pandemic bubble last November when it came out, but I was like, I just remember thinking when we finished it, I was like, oh, I'm so proud of this. I hope it finds like a little like niche audience that it can like hold on to. And then I think just something about the timing of everybody wanting something escapist, something that had that dark humor, but still left you feeling exhilarated rather than down. And everyone had gotten to the end of Netflix and the end of Hulu, like at that point. So I think the timing, I think, was right for the show to kind of get a foothold, and people just really responded to it. And I'm totally blown away by that. But it's only making us more confident to do crazier shit in season 2. So we'll see if it works out for them.
That's so great to hear. I mean, I was watching it with my fiance the whole time, and my fiance likes to talk to the television, especially when crazy shit is happening.
That kind of show, like, don't do that, Cassie.
Yeah, no, she had a lot of things to say to Cassie throughout. And, and that's what's great about the show is that Cassie makes a lot of bad choices, but at the same time, they make sense for her character. It's certainly a lot of stuff I wouldn't do, but like if you put yourself in that world with her mindset and you find out a lot of the backstory about why she is who she is throughout the season, it makes sense. Like as dumb as she gets, everything that she does makes sense.
If you can, I mean, this is always my thing for theater too, because as you know, my plays usually start in something that looks kind of like the normal world and then go batshit bananas. So like, it's if you can take whatever that character's core truth is and really, and like who they are as a person and like really like screw it into the ground, then you have a stable place in the middle of your story. So then you can slowly like peel back every crazy layer that you want to until, she's running through the hallways of her own mind with multiple copies of a dead man and a childhood version of herself. And everybody's like, this makes sense here. So it's like, you have to let people know that they're in good hands. Like as a storyteller in whatever medium, you have to let people know that they're in good hands, and then they'll trust you, and then you can slowly move them to a weirder and weirder and weirder place, and they'll go along for the ride because they believe that you are going to deliver. Then if you lie to them or you screw them over, they hate you.
Absolutely. You got to just be true to the characters. It's like, in genre stuff, if you set the rules of magic, and then as crazy as those rules of magic might be, you could stick to it. But then as soon as you break those rules, they'd be like, okay, now I don't believe that flying spaceship is XYZ. It's like,
people are smart, and they're watching more and more television now. So they're savvier. The viewers are savvier, and they catch on to that shit. They're like, no. And the thing is, they're not storytellers, right? So they don't respond to it as, oh, they kind of broke a promise about the internal logic that they've been working for their show. They go, oh, I didn't like that episode. I don't think I like this show anymore. And they don't necessarily know why. And it's because, you broke a promise.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talked a little bit about season 2. Tell me what happens at the end. Just kidding. No. So when you went into your initial pitch, did you have to talk about multiple seasons? Because the book is pretty much a book. It doesn't have multiple episodes, I believe, right?
No, it does not.
Yeah.
I think we had to kind of be like, have a sense, but honestly, the show, really what people wanted was like that an 8-episode story, right? And so really it was important to me to tell a story in 8 episodes that had a beginning, middle, and an end, and that had the longest journey possible for Cassie, because then the audience has the longest journey possible through the 8 episodes. So I think that we did that, and then we have stuff that we layered into the first season that are different things, levers that we could pull for season 2 if we decided to go in whatever direction. So I think we were in good shape, but I also think that people were happy. Like if there was never a season 2 of The Flight Attendant, I don't think people would be like, oh, I'm devastated. They would be like, okay, I got an ending that I feel good about. And they'd be like, but where's Megan? But like, other than that, oh, there's my puppy. I apologize. We almost made it all the way through. And then
so close. I don't think we warned the audience when we said we were going to.
Oh, I have a new puppy. I'm sorry, audience.
Now they just think that you were murdering something. So when were you in the writer's room, and maybe during the shutdown, did you have a chance to really think about season 2 a little more in detail, or were you still too cautious or focused on season 1 to even think about season 2?
Like, I don't know if you remember what that was like. I was
don't remember it at all.
Are we even going to get to finish season 1? Do you know what I mean?
Right.
We were all working towards a very specific thing, but it was like, what are you going to do? You know? So I think we were trying to make sure that if we were allowed to come back and finish season 1, if that was going to make sense and we could do it in a healthy way, then we wanted it to be on point and safe. And so those were the things that I was thinking about. I definitely was not thinking about it. I wasn't thinking about a season 2 when the show premiered, because I was still like, what is going to happen with this crazy wind-up toy that we are about to put on the air? So the good news is the writing staff for season 2 is comprised of some just unbelievably talented writers, and we're having a lot of fun. I think it's going to be exciting. I think it's going to be a continuation of the journeys of those central characters from the first mystery. And we had always said, if we got multiple seasons, we're going to treat it like the first one was a book, like you said. So then the second one will be another new Cassie Bowden as the flight attendant adventure. Like, so each one can be its own sort of extended movie.
Yeah, I mean, it is the flight attendant.
Yeah,
that's it would be really weird if it became about something else.
Yeah. Or if in the second season Cassie decided to become a veterinarian and it was called The Veterinarian.
So talking about your room real quick, how many people were in your room?
The first time around there were 10 people in the room, and this time there's 10 people in the room.
Okay, that feels like a lot. Is that for a show like this, or do you feel like that's a pretty good normal?
I mean, I'd say between 8 and 10 is probably standard for a show like this. I mean, sometimes like Lemony Snicket's Series of Unfortunate Events had like Daniel Handler and 3 other writers or something like that. It was crazy. Do you know what I mean? That they were able to turn out all that work. But then, you know, you look at a network comedy and they have like 2 writers' rooms running, one for jokes, one for story. So I think there's all different permutations. Certainly the studio and network were supportive of us hiring the particular writers. So I didn't go in with like a number. I went in with like, who do we want? Like, who can we not live without? And then those were the people we hired.
That's fantastic. So we're wrapping up a little bit, but the magic question that a lot of Atlanta writers are asking is, can you live in Atlanta and write? And that question has been more in flux now that you know, you're on a virtual writers' rooms. A lot of these writers' rooms are virtual.
Yep, ours is.
Yeah. Do you have anybody out of state working?
We do. We have someone in New York and we have someone in Texas right now, and then everyone else I think is scattered throughout the LA area.
Right. So yeah, talk a little bit about that, you know, having I mean, obviously you're an established writer now, but there are a lot of writers who are still trying to break in or just get in rooms. And is it easier now? Is it weirder now? Is it harder because of this? What do you think?
It's different for everyone. Look, Topher Payne is an Atlanta writer that a lot of people will know that are watching this, I'm sure. And, you know, he asked me once that question and I was like, I think you have to move here. And he was like, well, I'm going to have a career where I don't have to leave Atlanta. And he's done that. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's writing movies and having success. So like, I think there are different answers. I stand by the idea that in order to get your sort of initial job in a television writer's room, you probably need to be in New York or LA. And I think that LA is easier because most of the writers' rooms are here. It's a career with an extremely difficult barrier of entry, because once you get in, like once you get your first job, unless you get fired or like really fuck up, then you tend to tend to keep working. So that means that the jobs are always full, which means it's hard to break in. But for the people that do, it's, you know, it's a career. It's not just like, oh, I worked on a show once. It's like you keep getting hired by people. So I think if you want to be a filmmaker, certainly there are tons of people in Atlanta that have proven that you can be in Atlanta and make a film. And certainly the film industry in Atlanta is massive at this point. There's more things filming in Atlanta than there are in Los Angeles. That's not even a joke. That's just true.
Nothing shoots that way.
So it's the opportunities are there, but I think for television right now, maybe you could get a job because of the virtual nature of most writers' rooms. But I know even people I know now are starting to go back to offices and have writers' rooms around a table. And I think then it gets trickier to not be in Los Angeles for at least the beginning of your career.
Do you feel like you'll go back to a room, or do you feel like you like the Zoom world, the brave new Zoom world?
I don't hate the Zoom world because we have shorter hours. We tend to get more done in a shorter period of time because everyone's super focused. And also because once you've been on Zoom for like 4 hours, your brain starts to mush. So like that doesn't help me. I like it, but I really, really miss being in a writer's room. Sort of the energy of it, being able to walk into someone's office and ask like, oh, I have this thing kind of noodling around in my head. Everyone having access to the board instead of these kind of like, we're using Miro, this program, to have a virtual board, which is great. And our writer's assistant is doing a killer job of managing it, but it just feels different. I think if your first room was a virtual room, then you would always be like, oh, virtual rooms are fantastic. But having been in a regular writer's room, I do miss it.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing like just that we're all learning. The human contact is, a lot of people are talking about, oh, things will never be the same. And it's like, dude, we need to hug each other. We need to be in the same room. We need to breathe the same air. People are going back into rooms.
We just need to leave our houses. Like I need to have some place to go that's not here where I sleep.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
so where are you at now in season 2? You are still writing, or
we're in the writer's room. Season 2's been the writer's room's been going for about a month. I think we've done a deep break of about half the season at this point. We're excited. We're excited about how things are moving forward. Just that and continuing to. I have a couple of other projects that are up and going, and a film that I'm writing, so it's like it's good time.
Yeah, that was going to ask if you were dipping in your toe into the film world.
Yeah, I have one original project that's set up, and then one piece of IP that I was hired to write. So I've got 2 open assignments right now.
And in your free time, running an HBO MAX show.
I mean, I'm one of those people that's always been like, I need to have a lot of things going on. Yeah. I get bored very easily and I get distracted very easily. And so this is great for me because I can kind of bounce between like film, TV, and theater, and each one feels different and uses a different set of muscles. So it feels like getting the exercise that I'm not getting by staying in my house all day.
Do you have any directing aspirations? I don't think you directed any of your plays in Atlanta, did you?
Yeah. I don't. I feel like people are directors because they're good at directing. I'm a writer because I'm good at writing. Like I trust other people. Again, I think this is coming up through theater. It's not that people shouldn't do that. It's that for me, I think my plays at Dad's Garage were better when Kate Warner or Melissa Folger or Sean Daniels directed them than if I had been like, I want to see exactly what's in my head, because they were more than what was in my head, because they brought their ideas, the actors brought their ideas, the designers brought their ideas. Like I would never dream of telling Liz Fawnin how to dress someone. Do you know what I mean? I trust her to be a wardrobe supervisor and a costume designer. Like, so I think that you have to surround yourself by people that you trust to do those jobs. And you find partners, you find creative partners, people that you want to work with over and over again. So, I don't have any aspirations to direct. I wouldn't want that. I don't pay enough attention to my own writing to direct it.
That's funny.
This could be a bad thing to admit, but
no, man. Like,
again, not a joke.
Yeah, do what feels right. All right. So, last question.
Okay.
Have you? I'm sure you've thought about this, given this a lot of thought, and we had this conversation in my household extensively. What would you do if you woke up next to a dead body one day and you didn't know what or whatever happened in a hotel in a foreign country? Have you not thought about this? Did you not have your go bag, your escape plan?
I mean, I thought about what Cassie would do. I think that I think I'm just I'm boring. I would call the police. I would like immediately call the police. I don't have a lawyer friend to call. Oh, I do have a lawyer friend that I could call actually. I don't know. Maybe I'd do the exact same thing Cassie did, but I just wouldn't look as good doing it. I think that, yeah, I think that's it.
Wow. Oh no, this was like there was a very strong conversation in my house where I was like, no, you just GTFO, get out of there, like without touching anything, and get on a plane as quickly as you can and start a new life.
Touched everything, but you touched everything the night before, right? Like,
but you start a new life. You're in a different country, just like. Whereas Gabby's like, no, you go to the embassy and you talk to. Maybe this is.
That's what I would do. I actually would do that. I would go to the U.S. embassy. I would call the police and then I would leave and go to the U.S. embassy.
Maybe this is my black man in Atlanta mentality. It was like, I'm getting the fuck out of there. I mean, there's probably a right answer to that, but hopefully we'll never.
The right answer to it is call the police and wait for them to come. That's the right answer, but is it the correct answer? I don't know.
That is very true. That is very true. Well, I can't thank you enough for being a part of this. I do. It's funny. Joe Sykes is a friend of mine, and when we were. Yeah, we were working on this movie VHS that did well at Sundance and all that kind of stuff. And Dave Bruckner, the director, was having a hard time finding a guy that they liked that could do full frontal nudity. And I was like, I know somebody. I've seen Joe Sykes' dick so many times in Steve Yockey's plays.
I'm sure he'll be thrilled with this particular portion of the interview.
Well, tastefully done and amazing artistry at that.
I'll tell you what, speaking about finding collaborators, like Joe Sykes and I were in college together, undergrad. And he was in my very first play that I ever wrote, and almost every single play after that he's been in some way, shape, or form in Atlanta. Incredible actor, but also when you meet artists that you just vibe with, he's like someone that I trust to do just about anything that I write. So I'm glad you brought him up. That's a really good example of a collaborative
absolutely partner. And it's not just because of his lovely man parts. He's a fantastic actor. No. And he stole the show in VHS. Like there's
I thought he was fantastic in VHS. The whole piece was a real standout, but like I thought he was fantastic.
Yeah, him and Hannah they stole the show for that thing. Yeah, man, this has been a blast. Thank you so much. Good luck and congratulations. And I can't fucking wait to see the season 2. We really consumed it. So
I hope when it comes out that you are entertained.
Absolutely. All right. And to our audience at home, thank you so much for watching us, and be sure and check out a lot of the other creative conference conversations that we're having. I can plug my own. I did a one with Ty Franks from The Expanse, and we kind of the opposite, and the writer trying to get his book turned into a TV show. So you can watch those back to back. And then keep supporting Atlanta arts. Thank you so much.